Hi everyone. I hope you're keeping well. And now I'm actually in Bangalore right now, and the lockdown here is slowly being lifted. So we get a little bit of freedom to step out, and that's nice. How are you all doing? I'm going to invite Janice now to join me. And she's one of my favorite young writers from the Northeast, and I'm very excited to have her here. Hi, Janice.
Hi, Julie.
Hi.
Hi.
I was just saying, I'm so excited to be able to be talking to you today on
Well,
this. Yeah.
it's lovely to hear your hair. You have such funky hair.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah,
Just, yeah, I just let it go. Mm.
it's very cool, Julie. How are you?
I'm good. I'm
Yeah,
good. I'm very
super.
excited to be here. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, same here. I'm very happy to be here. I hope
Mm.
things get better really, really quickly so that Curtain Call
Yeah.
Adventure can start doing the things that they do best, which gives
Yes, I hope
the
so too. We're looking forward to that. Mm. Mhm.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So very happy to answer
Yeah. To
um
be there, to be at
question.
home.
Mhm.
Mm. Anyway, to begin, thank you for joining me today. It's an absolute pleasure. Yeah, and I'm so excited that we're going to be talking about many things. One of which, to begin with, I thought, growing up in Assam and Shillong,
Yeah,
I grew up with a lot of folklore.
yeah,
It wasn't just tales, but it's a kind of intertwined the folk tales with, uh, and how people believe in it.
yeah.
And among the Khasi ones, I think I mentioned this in an earlier conversation, was Clem, the
The
serpent. Yeah,
yes, yes.
yeah. And about money Raithong, money
Mhm,
Kraithong. Yeah,
mhm.
and about the mountains. There were always so many stories about the mountains and the deers, things like
Yes,
that. So, did you
yes,
also grow up with some of these stories?
yes. So much. I think because the Khasis, the Jaintias, the Garos, so all the indigenous communities in these hills, they share a largely oral culture. So we've managed perfectly well for the longest time without a script. And so our our sort of reservoir of culture really resides within the oral, and the oral takes many forms. One of them, of course, as you said, our folklore. So we grew up hearing folk tales, and because they exist in an oral form, you have many versions of the same folk tale. No one, no storyteller will ever tell you they make it their own. So I've heard many versions of Mani Graitong. I've heard many versions of the Tlen stories. And this is what I love about oral culture, that it exists in so much multiplicity. And
Yeah.
the other aspect of belonging or coming from a largely oral community is that people love to talk and tell stories.
Mm.
So these are my sort of memories of growing up in Shillong, in Assam, sitting around, not really much else to do, to be honest. Nothing to watch on TV, and I still think there's nothing to watch on TV. And
My
internet,
son will disagree with you, but
you know,
he's all of 10, huh?
3,000 channels, and you're flicking, and there's nothing.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true. That's true. Mm.
But so that's what
Mm.
we did. We sat around, the fire when it was cold. You'd sit and tell stories. We gathered for weddings, or we gathered for funerals. People would sit and tell stories. And, I think this has really played a large part in me becoming a storyteller, a writer, someone who enjoys telling stories because I've grown up listening to stories around me, in the
Oh,
form of tales and in the form of general bonding and sort of community activity.
mm. Yeah. So which one is, do you have a favorite?
Oh, I have so many. I love the folk tales that actually explain. the landscape around us. So why a river flows in this particular way? Because she was, a very feisty young woman, and she was angry about something, and so she changed into a river and she swept everything to
Uh,
Bangladesh down to the, or that
mhm.
particular,
I've
those
heard
particular.
that one.
Yes, exactly. Or these two particular hills were brothers, and they couldn't stop fighting, and one threw lots of mud at the other, and the other one threw lots of stones, and to this day you'll see that one hill is covered in soil and the other is covered only in rocks. And these stories explain the landscape around you, and not just that, they also bring a landscape to life. I think this is what I particularly love about folk tales, that they're so deeply embedded within the earth, within what we see around
Yeah.
us.
Yes, and about, that's true. They also explain the harmony that we had, when
Yeah.
living with nature, because we were so dependent for agriculture and things. I
Yes.
think that's a really nice, it brings it all together so well. Yeah. Little while earlier you have mentioned that, everybody tells a story differently. And I
Yes.
had, growing up, I had my special people I used to go for stories. Did you
Yes.
have anyone
Oh, I have lots of storytellers in my family.
who are the special storytellers for you?
Yes. I love. I hope. Can you hear me? I'm sorry. I think I
Yes,
lost.
yes, 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 a little bit. We lost you for a second there.
Okay,
Mm.
but I'm. My father tells very, very good stories, and I think because I've spent sort of time with him growing up in Assam, now here in Shillong, I think he would be my favorite.
How lovely. Mm. And do any of it, did it influence you to become a storyteller?
Oh,
did you decide on that genre of stories, or,
yeah.
or is that loose and,
I think what I'm interested in is not so much folk tales as sort of this pure form, but how folk tales, if such a form even exists, but folk tales and how they intertwine in our lives, um, how we sort of try and explain things that happen around us through folk tales, and how they become embedded in our mundaneness. I think that's what I love about folk stories. And I think that's how I've tried to also treat them in the writing that I do. If you've read the stories in Boats on Land, then you'll know that the folk tales, the fantastic, and the very mundane exist together all at once, at the same time. It's very hard to kind of pry them all apart.
mm,
And to answer your question, more directly, absolutely. I think my love for stories, really is so deeply embedded and anchored to the place that I've grown up in, to the communities that, I've grown up in. And I think what I would love to do is to carry that joy of telling and listening to stories into my writing. Because we tell stories, for pleasure, to entertain, to, yes, sometimes teach, moral lessons, but mostly the stories we remember are the stories that
mm.
laugh and move us.
That
And
entertain you. That's true.
yeah,
That's
and
true.
that's what I would love to translate into my own writing.
Mm. How lovely. That's really nice. Mm. And in your poems, I know that you mentioned somewhere that you're a poet also, and that
Yeah.
is that about that? Do they also reflect this, or it's a different genre?
I'm a little slightly wary of really claiming to be a poet. I haven't sort of written lots of poetry. I don't have a book of poems published, or anything sort of formal like that. But I think my love for poetry and my interest in poetry poetry that I have written, all of that comes from the fact that up, like I said, within a largely oral community.
Mhm.
Because of this, I'm deeply interested in the sounds of language. In language as something that is physical, that comes not on a page or on a screen, as as so much of it does for us nowadays, but as something that from our chest, our throat, that mimics the rhythms of our heartbeat, of our breath. I think we forget sometimes that language is a deeply, deeply physical thing. It is sound. It is literally the air we breathe in and out. So poetry for me is the same. Um, I don't know if I've lost you again,
No,
but I
no,
was
no,
just
no, you
saying that
haven't lost me,
poetry
but
with the
that's very, very interesting. I have to think of it as a physical form, which is, that's interesting. That's a nice take you have there. Yeah, that's very good. Yeah.
yeah, and poetry for me similar things because poetry is about sound and poetry is about rhythm and beat and echo. So those things sort of intertwine for me intricately.
That's nice. Yeah. And right now you're in Shillong.
I am. I am. I
Mm.
managed to travel to see my parents. I was in Delhi all this while.
Mhm.
But I managed to travel home just to be with my parents for a bit. And I'm here very lucky to be back.
Mm. Sorry, I'm trying to read a question that's come in. Traditions that the tales are transforming with times, or is that just nostalgia and pleasure of an old story that we grew up with? Maybe do you find them? Sorry, this is a. Is there a way of continuing in the oral tradition that the tales are transforming with the times, or is that just nostalgia and pleasure of an old story that we grew up with?
I
Maybe
think
do.
stories that are told are always new
Mm,
because they are re-energized, reinvigorated every time they are told. And
mm,
every time they are told, they are also, in some way, always new. So, this is why I think we never get tired of hearing stories. You think about children and how they sometimes ask you for the same story. They know
sorry, yeah,
exactly what's going to happen, but they will
yeah,
ask you for the same story because they love the pleasure is in listening to the story. So,
stories, yeah.
I think that there's no such thing as an old story
Mm,
that's told.
old story.
I think
Mm,
all stories that are told are always new.
yeah. And I also find that certain stories over time change, like recently an old tale I heard somebody tell my daughter, and in that story it's that person was having some sort of snack, was using a cell phone, everything starts changing form with time. Hmm. That's the thing.
Yeah,
Okay, now I was going to ask you
absolutely. A
about
story
Shillong.
is, yeah.
Yeah. Now, I was going to ask you about Shillong. What are your favorite places there? What is it that you like to do in Shillong while you're there? I know that it's more it's like a going home, sort of a break for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And this time round, of course, we're still a little bit under lockdown, so I haven't been able to do the usual things that I come
Mm.
home and do, which is a bit sad. But it really helped at the really not to complain. But what do I love to do in Shillong? I love to walk around in Shillong. Um, Either go to Ward's Lake in the center of town and feed the fish, the many, many fish at
Yeah.
around.
On the bridge, from the
Yeah.
bridge. Yeah, that's a favorite. I think it's an all-time favorite. Yeah. Mm.
How can you not love it? It's such a Shillong thing to do.
Mm.
And then, of course, there are innumerable little chai shops, little jadok,
Mm.
you know,
Yeah.
uh, places
Shops.
that's tea and a little snack. And most of these places are nameless, so I'm not quite sure how I can even sort of pinpoint them out to you. But they're around town, and you sit and you have a cup of tea and you have a little, snack, or as they call it here, jingbam disha, something to eat along with your tea. Um, I think, these are my favorite things to do in
Yeah.
Shillong. And the other thing that really lockdown has quite taken away from us is that there's a forest behind our house where we live, slightly, and we go for walks there every day because it's just you know, rejuvenating experience. Just to hear the wind in the trees and the sound of the birds, you know, the sunlight sort of dappling through the leaves. It's just
How
really
lovely.
such a,
Yeah.
yeah, have, space like close to us. So really,
That's
that
really,
has been
that's
such,
really lovely. Yeah.
yeah, it's been
I
such,
went to, we both went to Loreto Convent. Of
yes.
course, I was much earlier, yeah, for a little bit. And I was in the hostel. There were two things that we should really look forward to. One was going, once a week we were taken to the boys' school, St. Edmunds, for a movie. That was a huge highlight for us.
Oh, very,
And the other thing that and it's the first thing I thought of when I decided to do tours in Meghalaya, was my local guardian used to take me. We used to do a lot of treks up a Shillong, go
oh,
all over
lovely.
walking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's only recently that I've started taking a car in Shillong. Those days we used to walk everywhere. And
Walk
I still
every,
remember, yeah, going to look for birds and the first orchids, the ground orchids that used to come up, how
yes.
beautiful that
The
used to be.
little, the lady's
Yeah,
slipper,
yeah,
the,
yeah, ladies.
little orchids that
Yeah.
come out everywhere. And they're
Mm.
just such lovely places to go to. Just outside Shillong, there's Maupyang
Yeah.
with Sacred Grove, of course, and
Yeah.
close to
Mhm.
Smith, there's like Loam, which features in a lot of my fiction, I have to admit.
Yeah.
Um, it's the
It's no, that's very beautiful. It deserves that place. Yeah.
it's
Do
quite
do you ever go to a place to write in Shillong or around? Have you ever been?
um
Or there's
I
no
think
such.
at the moment, it's pretty much right at home in my
Mm.
sort of but I do sort of sometimes take, my book or my notebook to the little chai shops I was telling you about,
Huh.
sit there and watch the world go by and do a little writing. Mostly,
Yeah.
as they say in Shillong, Lorni, which is
Huh.
nose around and kind
Knows.
of what other
Huh.
people are doing,
Huh.
see what
But
everyone
it gives
else
you a
would
little
like.
of the local flavor. That's nice. There's a question
Yes,
that's coming. There's a question that's coming from Samantha. Let me read it. Oops.
yeah.
It's with people moving on to reading out of a gadget, how tough is it for writers to make a living selling hard copies of books? Is there anything being done to keep traditional reading out of a book? Was that?
Would you like to go back to that later, Judy?
Yeah, I think we should go back
Or
to that
would
later. Yeah, yeah. No, we can go back to that later when we'll discuss. Yeah, there's another one with the lockdown on. There must be a glimpse of Shillong of cure. Sans all the traffic. Do you feel when you have you
that
gone
is
for a
true.
walk? Yeah.
It's very quiet and there are no traffic, which, as you can imagine, is quite a rare thing these days.
Mhm.
Anyway, so it does feel quite like old Shillong. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. A friend of mine shared some images, of Shillong recently, where they fell some trees, pine trees. I think it is connecting. I'm not sure exactly where, and there was a protest to stop felling pine trees along the way. I'm not
Yeah.
really sure exactly where this was. Yeah, which was kind of
I think
sad.
it
But
was
I'm
on
glad
the
that,
way to,
yeah. Okay,
yeah.
so that's
Yeah, but
good.
I think
Okay.
managed,
Mm, yeah.
thankfully.
Mm.
Yeah. Things like that just break my, yeah.
Yeah, I know. They're so upsetting. And
Yeah.
since you talked about Jado and do you cook? Do you enjoy cooking, or are you just a survival
I
cook?
love cooking. Um,
Yeah.
Um, but I have to admit that over lockdown, cooking every day, every meal has been slightly challenging.
Mm.
I like the feeling of, I cook when I want, but that's not the that, of course. we can avail of when it's locked down all over. So I have been cooking a lot more in the last year or so. But I do enjoy cooking, and I live in Delhi a lot of the time, and I make sure I take so much stuff with me from
Yeah, that
Shillong
was going to be my
back to
question. What do you take back?
bamboo, because you
Bamboo shoot.
cannot get good
Yeah.
bamboo shoot in Delhi nowhere. Like I love the bamboo shoot, the fresh shoot that you have. I always take back turmeric because
Mhm.
turmeric here from the hills is just
Mhm.
excellent. And also black sesame,
Mhm.
what we call
Yeah,
in Khasi
different. Mm.
Neyong, yes, the black
Yeah.
sesame seeds that that actually it's used a lot in Jaintia hills. The Jaintias cook a lot with black sesame, and they cook just the most amazing dishes. I love
Yeah.
Jaintia food. So I take those
Take
three
back.
things for
Things
sure,
back.
always.
Mm.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And any of the pickles,
Yes,
the
yes.
soapy. Mm.
Poppy and the bamboo shoot pickles and the stuffed red chili pickles. Oh my God, you're just making my mouth water now, Chili.
But you have access to those right now. We don't.
This
Yeah.
is true.
And
I
that's
will
what I
treat
love.
you with every.
Exactly. Remember me next time you dig into that. Anyway. Okay, moving on. Now, I know that everybody's
I
waiting
will.
to hear, tell us. It's so exciting to, to be a published author, for the awards you won, and to have a new novel out, which is going to be published by Harper Collins. Everything the light touches. Can you give us an insight into your book? I know it's going to be released
So
next
in
year.
yes, it will. So it's quite a big fat novel, I have to confess. And it is my most ambitious work up, to date. And it, in some ways, returns to the landscapes of the stories in Boats and Land. It goes back to certain sort of themes, literary landscapes, and actual geographical landscapes. So it returns to Shillong, it returns to these hills in a lot of ways. But that's just one of the narratives in the book. It's actually an intertwining of four different narratives across three or four different centuries. And it's all about four travelers. We meet four travelers who are taking these journeys for very specific reasons. And at the heart of the novel, because as I said, it's quite a big novel, so it's difficult to condense into a few lines. But at the heart of the novel is this conflict between the different ways that people see the world. How some of us tend to see things as fixed and categorized, labeled, and how some of us see the world as organic and unified and holistic, where everything connects with everything. So
Wow, that sounds exciting. Mm.
thank
Can't
you.
wait. I can't wait to get hold of my book.
Soon,
Hopefully, get a signed copy this time. Yeah, that thing.
absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So, when people ask me to recommend books, and a lot of time, fiction books, people say, what do you recommend? Of course, yours is, your books I highly recommend. And I do recommend another classmate of mine, Anjum Hassan, her
Yes,
books,
yes.
because I think
Oh, you are
contemporary writing. Yeah,
right.
Anjum and I were classmates, yeah, in
Oh,
Loreto. Mm.
oh, fantastic.
So, yeah, okay. So, and so who would you recommend?
Oh, there are so many writers that I love from here. One would definitely be Bak and Palm Nonkanri, who is out with a new novel next month, Julie, and you have to read it. You have to get your hands on it. It's a big, when I my novel is big, it pales in comparison to the book that Bak and Palm has written. It's called Funeral Night, and it's set in the Khasi Hills, and it's about an ancient Khasi funeral custom that a group of people travel to a village to go and perform. And almost like Boccaccio's Decameron, they get stuck in the forest and they tell each other stories. And
Oh, it's
it,
good.
yeah, it sounds fantastic. So definitely Funeral Nights by Bach and Palm Nonkenreek. It's out next month. Bach,
Sorry, can you tell us the name again?
Bach and Palm. So Bach as in Mr.
Okay.
Kan Palm
Mm.
Nonkenreek. So just to help out anybody who's, interested, there are a bunch of posts on my Instagram feed where I've made, reading lists for sort of, people interested in Meghalaya, and a larger sort of Northeast reading list as well. So, feel free to go and look up and mark and save and read.
Yeah. So just for everybody, Janice's Instagram handle is Janice Parrot.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it's I put it in the thing. I will share it again for those interested.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Janice, thank you so much for chatting with me. Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure.
It's been so much fun. And I'm so happy to talk about food and the places that I love visiting. Because usually I only am asked literary questions, which I also love answering. But this is something, and
Good.
I just enjoy it so much. So thank
Yeah.
you for inviting
My
me.
pleasure. Yeah. Thank you everybody for joining us. And I hope you're all as excited as me and looking forward to 2022 for Janice's book to be released. Yeah. Okay. Thank you
Yes.
so much for joining us. Have a good weekend. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.